Do that.
You just press pause in the upper right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Not get too much in the weeds, because if we get into the weeds, we'll be here till midnight. It is, there's a lot. But if you want to know more, you'll know the people to talk to, and you'll know who they are, and you'll see them, and you can follow them. But we're gonna give you enough information, and there is a handout at the back that is kind of summary of what they're talking about tonight, that if people aren't here and you want to talk with your neighbors about it, you can share this information. Also, another takeaway tonight is that, each project that you're gonna hear about is its own thing with its own process. So there is not one Brook Road, for example. There are many parts. You'll hear about that tonight. And we hope that you will leave with a positive feeling that there's been a lot of progress and there's a lot of good work being done. Okay. So what we hope to do tonight is share with you what we do know. We will also tell you what we don't know. And we'll try not to veer too much into speculation, because we know that we're living in times where there's a lot of unknown and things change day to day. And I think that's where we are. And did we get that worked out? Does Kim have it or do we have it?
Kim's got slides.
Okay, so can we bring up the slide presentation and just show the agenda slide, please? Next one. We're doing this remotely, so Kim, can you move it one slide, please? Thank you. So here's the agenda for tonight. So we just did welcome and introductions. I talked about our goals for tonight. The project overview, you're going to hear from Gary about FEMA, you're going to hear from Josh about Federal Highway, and we're going to have a long time to ask questions. So what we're asking you to do is save your questions. You have a handout, or you have hopefully a piece of paper where you are, and jot your questions as we go, and save them for the Q&A, because we'll have a lot of time to go into all that. Okay, so I think I think what I want to do now is just quickly say that between the July event and the start of this group, we were in and up and through January, probably November, December, January, we were in what we would call the emergency repair phase of the work. And so that was one part. And we have recently, with the snow melt and site inspections and things, we have entered what we're calling recovery and permanent project work. So you're going to hear about that from Gary, and you're going to hear about that from Josh, but I just want to set the stage that we're no longer in emergency. We are in recovery. And so as we enter into that, you'll learn about what's going on there. So I'm going to bring up Gary Smith, who is our FEMA Public Assistance Coordinator, and Gary's going to take you through a number of slides. And Gary, Kim Evans has the slides, so you just ask her to forward you through, and that should work. Okay. Welcome, Gary.
Okay, again, I'm Gary Smith, and let's see, oh, and you did, next slide. So this is perfect, you'll see this again, this is a Google Earth project. And I think that is a perfect heading for our thing, small town, big damage. From our July 2024 flood. And next slide, please. You're gonna see this again later on in my presentation, but this is a great map that Keith helped me put together.
I was supposed to introduce Keith, wasn't I?
Yes.
I went out of order.
And that is basically the permanent projects remaining to be done. And I wish I had a pointer. I'm used to using pointers for these things, but you can kind of just see the line of Brook Road. Those are all the green green spots along Brook Road. And guess where they all end up? The center of Plainview. So anyway, but.
So this is a live map, Gary, I'm sorry. So on your handout, there's a QR code, right? And yeah. I just want to say this is a live map, and Pete, were you prepared to open this map, or do you want to not do that?
We can do it.
Alright, so
Sure.
you want to, I messed up, so I'm gonna ask Pete to come up and
Sorry.
open the map. Sorry about that, guys.
Okay, sorry about that. Hello, my name is Keith Coven. I work for Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. I do emergency management, and transportation planning there. With our GIS staff, we put together this map of your community. Like Karen said, there's a QR code on the handout that's here, and you can also provide that for anybody as well. This shows all the permanent repair projects. So whether it's from FEMA, which in the legend with the map, it actually breaks it down because there's 3 different FEMA type projects. So the little crosses are for FEMA projects. So they're broken into C, D, and F projects. So C are for roads and bridges. D is water control, so like the Batch Elder Dam, still considered a water control project there in town. Or F are utilities. The federal highway projects, so Brook Road is a federal highway network road. So that process goes completely through the Department of Transportation and the federal highway. And those are in the little Pentagon symbols. Each one of those is a permanent project. So that means, you know, as we finish that emergency repairs, we'll still go through a completely separate process with engineers to determine what needs to be done in each of those locations. Josh will go into much more depth on those as well, but you can see some of those very closely overlap, you know, because you go 10 feet out of the right of way of that federal highway, and that becomes a FEMA project. So it's a very convoluted process. You have to know exactly where you're standing because that makes a difference on who's going to pay. Yeah, definitely peruse this map. If you have any questions about it, you can reach out to me directly. And my email is just Coven, CUVVON @cvregion.com.
They open up.
Yeah, can we open up the map actually?
Kim, can you click on one of those, any one of the icons?
Yeah.
Just open it. Yeah, that's just that.
Everyone can see that?
Didn't open?
No.
No.
There.
Yeah, as you can see on the left-hand side, it shows the different categories. And if you click on any one of those points on the map, it'll bring up information about that location. So it tells you who's funding that project. So whether it's FEMA or federal highway, includes some information you can actually drop down or pull down. Tells you whether it's culvert, bridge, basically what type of structure and what that project is. Again, if you just pull down on the right hand tab, that culvert, you can actually scroll through what.
Kim, can you just pull down on the, yeah, on the right, okay. Yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah, but it's pretty easy. It's pretty to work through. If anybody runs into any problems, definitely reach out and we can help walk you through that.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, next slide.
So if we can go back to the presentation. There we go. Perfect. Next slide. So, My goal is to tell you the FEMA story as I see it.
Stand in front of the microphone.
Yeah.
For better.
And, anyway, so this is basically, disaster, federal disaster, DR 4810. As a result of severe, the storm and flooding on July 9th through 11th. In 2023, Plainfield had a flood. This flood was order of magnitude difference. My perspective, the way I would say, it was a F4, F5 cyclone or a hurricane of that magnitude. It's just, it was a big one. Plainfield was one of the most heavily damaged communities in the state. The recovery, rebuilding, and resiliency efforts that are going on, at least from, and I've been awed by this all through the process, is really impressive. It is drawing a lot of attention locally, regionally, statewide, and nationally. And I kind of put that all into, due to the magnitude and complexity of the damages that the town is dealing with, and we are a small micro town. How the recovery is being addressed through a lot of very capable employees, but a big volunteer effort and a host of what I call Team Plainfield players that I'll talk about later. And then, even though it seems like it's watching paint dry, the progress is actually moving along pretty darn quick. Not quick enough for me, but from folks from away who do this stuff, they say it's moving along quite quickly. So let's see what else. The one thing I would mention, and for me, is Plainfield's got some momentum right now with respect to this recovery. There's a lot of attention. There's a lot of folks from away. There's a lot of folks right here that are very involved. And my 2 cents, that's why I'm involved. We've got to take advantage of this moment because some other disasters, something else is going to happen and we'll lose our moment in the sun. So we need to take advantage of this moment now. Next slide, please. So I'm like very big into this whole team thing, and I am just impressed by the leadership that's been put together on this. And I'll say it's folks at the town, but I take my hat off to Karen for pulling together this group and providing us with wonderful treats every week when we meet. But the team that I see it is the town office, town employees. You have some unbelievably skilled folks that you don't see in the town office every day that are doing their jobs. They're impressive. We have the town grants team, mostly volunteers. We have a big volunteer group. We have a consulting team or a group of 2 people, primarily the integrity group. The governor's staff and team are very much involved with the work here. I can't say enough about the Vermont Emergency Management and how they have come to the table to help us. One thing that I'm really excited about, that it was Vermont Emergency Management that got this running, but a funders roundtable will meet once a month to address funding sources and making progress on getting funding for Plainfield. And then Central Vermont Regional Planning, Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns, and many, many more locally regionally, nationally. Groups, religious organizations, nonprofits, it's just impressive, and every time I think that we've seen all of them, another one shows up, and that happens just about, well, I'm gonna say now, maybe once a month. Anyway, so, next slide. Probably if I'm honest, if I saw this before I started, I might have hesitated a little in stepping forward, but this is a long, pathway. We are in the middle row. We have just completed site inspections in April for the damages, the FEMA damage. We're moving into this. From there, we go into a thing, providing information on what they call essential elements of information and damages, descriptions and details. Oh, yeah. EDP. And that's where we are right now, and we are, with the help of Vermont Emergency Management, working actually very well with FEMA, but it is not easy. And we are learning to stand our ground, and I'll share a couple of examples. We expect in the next couple of months, we'll move through scoping and costing. And then we can start thinking about getting permanent projects started. So, one thing that I'll mention, we are the applicant to FEMA. Many states have a county government structure in place, so they act as the recipient of the funds, and then the funds come from the county. But in Vermont, it's the state, so it's through Vermont Emergency Management that we do that. So we work very closely with the state, Vermont Emergency Management, for the reimbursement for our expenses.
Hey Gary, I'm wondering if you take the mic out of the stand and use it.
Yeah.
Since you want to move your head,
Yeah,
it might be easier.
so. Okay. And I think we're ready for the next slide. So, this is the work that we have on address things with FEMA, and so Karen mentioned earlier, the emergency work period for FEMA is a 6-month period from the date of the declaration of the disaster, which was August 20th. So our emergency period for FEMA ended February 20th. And that basically covers areas of debris removal and emergency protective measures, getting roads, bridges, culverts safe, but maybe not the final repair. Permanent work hopefully begins earlier this summer, maybe later, but it's on road and bridge systems, water control facilities, that we had water and wastewater issues. We didn't have public buildings and equipment damage. But, and public utilities, like we don't run an electric power grid or anything like that. And then we had minimal damage to the Parks and Rec fields. Next slide. This is really just a high level overview of where we've been, and it's, I wasn't really gonna go over all of those, but these have been the major points along our journey this last 8 or 9 months. The one thing that I will note is on complex disasters, folks at FEMA say that this can take a long time, up to 4 or 5 years. I think you'll find that true. It'll probably be that kind of a time frame for ultimately when Plainfield is back to its new normal. Next slide. Oh, actually, one back. One slide back. So, one of the things that, our team has been focused on in addition to the rebuilding and resiliency and recovery work is getting focused on getting more money for Plainfield. And I think this, you'll see the little gold star at the end, but Plainfield's emergency relief and assistance funding rate is 17.5%. That's as high as it can be. So the funding for the cost of FEMA damages, 75% comes from the federal government, 17.5% is through the ERAP program, which comes from the state of Vermont. And then remaining 7.5 is from the town of Plainfield. Although, and I would add that the grants team is working on ways to, through other grants, that we can help reduce that 7.5% ultimately. So one thing I just have to take my hat off for is to get to that 17.5%. It required a lot of work up front. And I'm sure Michael had a lot to do with that, but a lot of folks in the town made sure those items were in place to get us this higher percent. And now we move to the next slide. So, a little bit about the challenges that we have faced as we walked through this process. The damage complexity, I learned this isn't easy stuff. We talked to Michael Bingham, we talked to people that have done this. You know, the Mill Street Bridge project, which Josh is going to talk to you about, but it is amazing the amount of complexity involved. So the next complexity, and I continue to be amazed by this, but the funding maze, it's just impressive. The multiple funding sources, the complex requirements. You know, there are many grants out there, programs that are actually talking to us now saying, you need to have a consultant to help put together an application. Because it is just a very competitive process, and there's a lot of people out there working for these funds, and we want to get them coming to Plainfield. The thing when we started working on figuring out what the damages were for Plainfield, they said, let's do a townwide survey, which included Brook Road. And we went well along in the FEMA process, identifying damages all over the town, in addition to Brook Road, only to find out a couple months ago that because Brook Road is a rural highway connector, Route 2 and Route 302, it is not eligible for FEMA funds. I wish we knew that earlier because we spent a lot of time collecting data on that. So that was one of our challenges. Another one of the challenges that we face, and FEMA's right up front, you're gonna probably see staff changes. Oh, okay. And they kind of said up front, well, every year we try to rotate people in and they move on to new assignments. Well, we've had in a fairly short period of time, because we might just be hitting the 6-month mark of working directly with FEMA. We have had 5 different program development, project development managers. 4 in a 4-week period. And yeah, we got through that, but the challenge was almost every single one of them gave us a different direction, restructured how all these damages get organized into projects. And all that does is, for us who are trying to make this work, there's a lot of redoing the same old work we've done. The good news is, we've got a great FEMA person now that we're working with. And we are back to how we wanted to organize our damages into projects way back in January. It was a long run around the barn. So, and then, what I would say is, as I've learned this, because I'm gonna start when we had all the town damages in the FEMA inventory. That was probably for us, probably about 130, 140 damage areas, items identified. And I think of that from an 80-20 rule. 80% of them were small, fairly low-cost projects. 20% of them, that's where you're gonna spend your money. And go back to the slide or the map that Keith showed. Most of those are right down Brook Road, right up in through the village, out to Route 2. One thing I wanted to mention, and this is a very current, there's emails flying in right now about this, is damages to culverts. We've had a lot of it. A lot of culverts being washed out. And we are having there's actually a meeting on Wednesday afternoon where is a culvert, or is a culvert a system? And by a system, it's the roadway, it's the head wall. I won't use all the perfect terms, but our position, the non-emergency management's position, from as I believe I understand it, is a system. But the site inspector, when they were here in April, there's nothing wrong with the culvert. So we're working through that, and thank heavens we have a consulting team that has this knowledge, and we're making progress on that. So, the thing I would say is, we are working through these challenges. We're really starting to make some progress. But at the end of the day, people are saying, well, this culvert's still damaged. I can't drive down Brook Road, all this kind of stuff. But I want to, I'm a big visual learner. And I have the next couple of slides, I think, really will show that even though Plainfield has had some tremendous damages, progress is being made. So we go to the next slide. And so you saw this Google Earth image on the right of this slide. And the green rectangle is basically Brook Road. And the yellow rectangle is basically the Plainfield Village. And you can almost see the flooding of 2024 that started at the beginning of – almost at our town line and went down, Brook Road into the village. And those are basically the damage, that's our damage inventory by a bunch of different parties. I was involved in a road survey, Vermont Transportation was involved. Some of the road crew identified. Some of the damages were identified by our consulting team, but it was a big work, and you can probably see 80, maybe even 90% of those damages are along that area. And then you get out into the roads feeding down into Brook Road or where there's hills and dirt roads. You basically see a much smaller number of damages. And I kind of, going back to my 80-20 rule, the tip of the iceberg are those large permanent projects. And what you don't see, and I hope you'll see when we go to the next slide, is that the emergency protective measures, which were a majority of the damages, but they were smaller, are now pretty much taken care of. And it's, to me, that's very impressive, given that we had a small road crew who had a lot of help with other from contracting folks, but they have made a lot of progress this past year, even with the early winter. So, so we go to the next slide. And here we are today. So I don't know what that number is, but it's a lot smaller than 130. So I think this, my hat goes off to the Plainfield Road crew and those who help them keep those roads open. So anyway, I think that's it. And right, oh, yes, I do. It's a good thing you're here, Karen. And then the next thing, where do we go from here? At least from the FEMA perspective is now that, well, hopefully we'll get through our culvert issue and we can move on to real work. But we're working on getting funding reimbursement for our emergency protective measures. That's basically volunteer time, that's debris removal and emergency work to get roadways open and safe for people. We're going to complete the scoping and costing phase of the FEMA life cycle. We're going to, and they're probably already underway, I just don't know it, but there's getting ready to do the permanent repairs, planning and implementation. And then this is one thing that I just worry about, but I know that the road crew's busy with their day jobs. They've got all these big projects going on in town, and then we want to add FEMA work to that as well. So that's kind of what's next for the world of FEMA.
Introduce Josh.
And now, Josh, treasurer, federal highway coordinator, or whatever title, wastewater. You've done a lot of jobs, Josh.
Who doesn't need another one, right?
Next slide.
So we can go to the next slide. So, Brook Road is different, and we talked a little bit about that, like with Karen, what Karen said. The main reason that Brook Road is different is that it's a federal highway connector. It's under the jurisdiction of the Federal Highway Works Administration. This picture here is one of the washouts that is just downstream of Gray Road. And this location will likely be one of the permanent projects, but you know, there's gonna be many permanent projects, probably about 10 of them. Go to the next slide, we'll talk about the Federal Highway Administration. So, the federal highway, we have, 100% coverage of the funding that is, required for emergency relief. And, restore the highway facilities, pre-disaster conditions. And when we were first setting out and in discussions with federal highway, one of the things that was emphasized is that some of these locations are gonna require a significant amount of engineering, and that it may not be practical to initiate emergency work at that location. And that first picture is one of those situations, and including the other large washout. And so the reestablishment of like connections, even though they're incomplete, was largely due to the fact that we were constrained from putting in, complex workaround, and likely wouldn't have had the time or resources to do the engineering required within that time frame. The permanent projects are 90% federally funded, which is a little less than what we currently have with FEMA. And but the grant team is also working to address like that, the town share and what we can receive to fill in that 10%. And the thing about federal highway is that is also like the way that municipalities get funding for their road projects. So it's an established pathway for funding, and that makes it in some ways easier to navigate than having like a lot of staffing changeover, and certainly like we have with FEMA. And then it breaks up that route into smaller projects. And number one being Mill Street, and then the last one, number 12, being Bridge 2 on the Morristown line, which in our case, this time won't be a permanent project. So we go to the next slide. So in those like 12 locations, one of the other areas that likely won't have a permanent component would be some of the scour washouts between Lee Road and Ray Road. And a lot of that is just that's where the brook kind of levels out there a bit, kind of straight, it's a little bit straighter. So there wasn't like a lot of crossings of the roadway there, so it didn't have a lot of bridges or structures that required that would cross the road when we found knocked out. But the two large washouts and any damaged bridges, which some of this is still kind of up in the air about, is this bridge going to constitute a permanent project or not, depending on which bridge we're talking about. But right now, Mill Street and then the bridge over the brook on Brook Road between Mill and Creamery Street are currently, those will be permanent projects, including the third project will extend to Cannon Road. And so each of those locations will have, we'll follow this well-defined process, and each project will have the opportunity for public involvement. So it really, they zoom in to the location and what's needed in that location for like public feedback and public information. And that well-defined process is on the next slide. Maybe it's not. Right, the municipal assistance section, which I think was the Municipal Assistance Bureau, and they changed it to section to save all of us poor spellers. And that process, the first part of the process in emergency relief is we submitted a detailed damage inventory report for each location. So we submitted all 12 of those as of this morning. And then we selected municipal project management for about half of the projects. And we're currently working with the municipal assistance section of AOT to sort of establish like who we can hire. And the reason that we kind of negotiate that with municipal assistance is we're using what's called the active ready process. So there's a roster of already like pre-vetted firms that can help do municipal project management, design and engineering of these locations and inspection. And so that, that at the ready list allows us to kind of accelerate some of this selection and get things moving quickly. And, to get the projects initiated and designed, in a fluid way. And so that flows on the next slide. Which is, I think, laid out at least a little better than the graphic that gave, Gary. It's not that much less complex, but, you know, this is the path that we have to follow for all of these projects on Brook Road. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that, we're here. Project initiation, and we're here for at least, 3 locations in terms of what's permanent, and so we're in the process of kind of moving everything up to this point. And then as we move on, we'll have a local concerns meeting, develop purpose and needs, and then accept those, and those are all done between municipal assistance and the local municipality. And as we go through the steps, going to the next slide, you'll see like it's color coded to show you like the you know, when we are thinking about who is participating in the process. It's either a process that is done with the local municipality and the Agency of Transportation, or federal, local and state, or just local. So if you can go back one slide. So as you can see, like in the beginning of the process, the municipality is handling a lot of that. And so that's why you are required to kind of select a municipal project manager from an engineering firm so that you don't get in over your head with all this stuff. And then as you move forward, you have even more of a local input into this process, which I think is great. So if we go forward 2 slides. So you will have input into each of these locations, and the design firms who are managing and doing the design work, they're all well coordinated. And so you cannot select the same firm to manage your project as design your project. So you always have a set of eyes looking at what your design engineering is doing. So it's a very like well thought out process with a lot of verification, and so you go on to the next slide. I want to talk about project alternative investigation. So at each of these, like for each of these projects, they will investigate, could we restore things as they were? What happens if we do nothing? What if we do something completely different than what was there before? And so we're able to kind of develop these alternatives and then have, out of the public input from the public around what the purpose and need of that is. And then, and then the town can come up with a preferred plan, or as they say, an alternative endorsement. So let's go to the next one. So like public information, around like these projects, it does seem like they have a big plan, but in fact, like a lot of the problems that are on one end of the brook are not necessarily like relevant to the issues in terms of the roadway and like what the road requirements are. So so at that public information meeting, they can do revisions to the conceptual plan so that, you can kind of see what's coming out of these concepts. We have like a preferred alternative, and then the public gets a large amount of feedback here to be able to talk to that alternative. So even after like the preferred alternative is selected, you'll be able to give plenty of feedback and then they can do revisions. So go to the next one. You know, so just to kind of recap, you know, like. The FEMA process is a change process, it's less defined, but. You get a lot of evaluation of like your damages prior to defining your projects. Like they go through pretty well, and they're talking about. What is, you know, the cost to replace this type of damage, this type of material, et cetera, et cetera. And then once the funds are obligated, it follows less exactly the path, like municipalities can, sometimes they can, you know, get into situations where they're trying to do design build, that could be some ways that the process with federal highway is being more constrained, gives you some, you know, gives you some assurances, but it may not let you kind of do something that is the most efficient, but the federal highway has a tight timeline for getting through that maze of like steps that we have to complete. Because we have to get things obligated before the end of the fiscal year, federal fiscal year, September 30th, 2026. So we have to kind of take on an accelerated process. Getting a lot of help from Keith Hubbard, thanks Keith. And I think that's all I have for the next slide.
That's questions. Yeah. Perfect. Thanks, Jeff. So I think Gary and Keith, Gary and Josh, you guys are probably gonna handle most of the questions. Are there any questions online? Press Rose, do we see?
Give me a moment.
Okay, and are there questions in the room?
I think this is our moment to invite questions.
This is the moment to invite questions. So if anyone has questions for the presenters. You'll use the mic so everyone online can hear.
The person asking the question,
I'm sorry.
the person asking the question has to.
Yes, the person asking the question must come to the mic as well.
Well, I mean, I suppose we could forward Lauren's question, which is already asked.
Yes,
Which
so you
is,
want to use the mic that's behind you on the, it's behind your computer. Sorry, not you. Thank you.
great.
Is it on?
No, it's not on.
Testing,
It's on.
yes,
Yes.
great, from Lauren Geiger. Gary was speaking of debris removal, but we still have a ton of debris near Hudson Avenue. When will this be removed?
To the best of your ability.
Well, I guess I'm gonna have to just follow up, because I'm not a doer, I'm kind of, so I'm gonna, I know that the time for it depends on whether it's on public property or private property, where it is. So I'm gonna have to get some more information and get back to you.
That's a fair answer. Thank you.
All right, you can presume, where it depends. From Don Fancher, when will the community get a chance to hear about, have input on, or at least hear about a plan and strategy for Brook Road and the brook as a whole?
Josh.
It's in for Brook Road. Because we're dealing with like these different, you know, locations, it may be that. What would make sense for like particular grouping of locations would have. They could maybe merge a public information meeting. But but because of the structure of how federal highway works, we have to, you know, we have to implement each project as its own unit. But a lot of that coordination is gonna be, we're gonna get a lot of help from, Central Vermont Regional Planning. And I don't know, do you wanna elaborate on some of that or around, like, how, you know, how we're gonna, some of these things will kind of work together.
As part of the process, as working through that, how it's defined by federal highway, we have to do what's called a NEPA review. So for each one of those projects, they have to basically look at alternatives. This has to be done even for bridges in town here. So basically, each project has to have at least two alternatives besides. One, like, it's really three alternatives, but they count one as two now. So at least two alternatives. And through that NEPA review, we're hoping to actually look at a couple of these segments together, or possibly looking at a couple of projects together and. Let the engineers kind of look at that overall value. So it might actually be a different alignment than what the current program is. They'll have to look at it, see what the slopes can handle, the whole engineers kind of review of that. And it'll still have to be cost effective. So, I mean, we've just looked at maps and kind of looked at some areas where that might be available possibility, but we'll have to work through that entire process.
Arian's microphone. Thank you, Keith.
I have a related question that has to do with, so if in those possible alternatives, how is, let's say how is cost evaluated in that, in the sense of like, let's say everybody's like, oh yeah, this one idea is so much better, but like, costs a lot more money. How do we know whether that is, we go with that, or the cheaper one, how does that evaluate, like, what's the?
Josh, Josh or Keith? When you're gonna talk about money?
Yeah, that's through that NEPA process, that's all reviewed. Federal highway actually has the final say. There's a term called betterment, so you can. You can sometimes choose a project that is more expensive. Generally, it works the other way, and from what we've been looking at, due to the where this bridge is, if we could possibly remove a couple of bridges, that gets. Even if you're building a whole new roadway, it generally gets cheaper back. Bridges are super expensive. Generally, currently ballpark, I mean, even for a small one, you're looking at about 2 million. Anywhere from probably 2 to 4 million for a structure that is a bridge. Just very ballpark.
Thank you.
I have a question. I mean, I think I'm asking perhaps the same question in a different way. Is there anyone holding the holistic, like 12+ permanent projects all together? Like, I'm understanding that each one of the 12 projects have to go through a process. There needs to be alternatives, designs ultimately get chosen and implemented. But do they all match one another? Do they all fit into some cohesive future whole? Who's holding the largest picture of the entire Brook Road corridor?
The process around, you know, looking at Brook Road holistically is that, and the thing to remember is, this is a local process. So when we're communicating to our municipal project managers and we're communicating to the design in the purpose and need statement, right? When we kind of get to that very next point, you know, which we have process initiate project initiation, but then after we have public input, which, you know, like many of these questions and concerns will come in, like we have now. For each of those, like, public information meetings, we are also like using the same project management firms and the same design firms for many of the adjoining projects, so. In terms of like coordinating the specifics of the adjacent ones, those would be the same people typically. And then in terms of like looking at a larger picture, because we are defining like what's important in our purpose and our need, like coming out of like our local concerns meeting, we get to define like what do we really want to have, you know, as a community. And that goes into, the initiation of the design. work. So when they look at these alternatives and you say, if everybody in the community comes and says, I don't want to spend any money, right? Well, then like you have more of an emphasis on do nothing, or if you say, we have to establish a connection. It's very important to have a connection to Orange, right? Or, so all of this community input kind of comes into how you're defining what your purpose and need is. And I think, in my opinion, that, we have, yes, you have these separate projects, but ultimately, the roadway, the connection between like the communities in Orange and the communities around Plainfield and Marshfield is not clear. Like that connector road is designed to actually facilitate that economy, that social connection. And I don't think we should break that. And that's my mandate as the road commissioners. Like, I think we need to maintain those connections. And those connections are really valuable for our social environment, our economy, and our community in general, like. So, for my part, I'm not gonna be a strong advocate for not doing things and not spending the money, because I feel like the money is there, a lot of people have eyes on, they feel it will help. So it's a long process of saying, okay. We have the same community is going to be coming to the same meetings. So the community really gets to have the input in that project definition, and that is what will go into that, into those alternatives and into those preferences.
John's asking, when do we hear the guiding principle that guides all these individual decisions? Yeah, I think that's. It unfurls with a lot of community input, is kind of, if I'm reflecting.
Right.
True, okay.
Yeah.
From Toby Buxton, debris continues to build up along the Great Brook. Anyone who walks along the brook can see landslides, additional trees and debris sloughing off into the brook. Is the town looking to do any protective measures to mitigate further damage or problems caused by high water events? Or are we just focused on reacting to what's already happening, not what will be happening in the future?
Thank you, Michael.
And this is a very important, Michael Wilson, I think this is a very important question. And it is being subjected to a lot of different eyes. I mean, it's not simply, there's just too much debris there. Because in fact, the debris plays a very positive role after a flood has happened. It helps provide break for the water coming from the top of the brook to the bottom of the brook. It keeps it from accelerating. And there are, at the same time, because it was so destabilized in 2024, there's lots of places that are just almost hanging on a hair's edge about whether it's going to collapse or not. So we can't particularly say that it's reached the end of its change. It's the river or the brook itself that is creating the energy to make this change. And part of the healthy solution for the future is to have the brook settle into something where its energy is absorbed in the landscape. And then at that point, the debris will act as a brake. It doesn't create the flood. The debris, if anything, slows the flood. So but at the same time, I'm not a river scientist. And so we have as our helper, river scientists who are working in tandem with the builder contractors. And those people will be helping evaluate the importance of what a future, I mean, there's something called cost benefit analysis, and when you try to figure out how much pain we are going to suffer in the future, you can look at the past. And as a consequence, when we go back just a few years, we can see there was a flood in 2023, there was a flood in 2015, there was a flood. You can go back to the 70s, some floods I've seen. And all of these floods, which George Springsteen has very carefully mapped one at a time, are often repairing exactly the same area of the road or exactly the same bridge standards. So when you look at a better, safer, and more predictable future, you also take the brook into account. So that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Michael. I also just want to add that one of the grants that is in play currently is a grant that will study the Great Brook from the top of the brook to the bottom. And it will be a multi-town grant that is being coordinated and funded through the Vermont Emergency Management Group. We are not having to do that work, we're not having to put that grant through, they're doing that for us. And it will inform all of the process that we're going to be in the middle of as we have these public hearings and we look at these alternatives. That study will help us understand because it will allow us to put different variables into it and see how the brook responds, how it reacts, and what that means for how we rebuild or do not. So we're working all of those avenues right now, so that we have all the best information to make good decisions as a community. Other questions? Here?
Who are the towns?
There's four, it's Plainfield, Marshfield, Washington. There was one other I saw today,
Orange.
I don't think it's Orange, but there was one more, and I sent an email today, but I don't remember it. Thank you.
But not on.
Don't think so. Any other questions from the room? Online? Any? Good. So, Carl, please.
You mentioned the difference of cost to the town between 23 flood and 24, which to me is always an astounding change. Do we know the numbers? Roughly, I mean, I've heard rough numbers, but
Currently? Or
Mike?
Yep.
Thank you. We won't hold you to it. We won't hold you to it.
Better be a lot of numbers, we might want to do. Currently, we have spent $1.7 million for flood recovery works from the town. And between moving some funds around to accommodate like early in the process of responding to the flood and then receiving a $1 million loan from bond bank. We're able to kind of pay those invoices that we need to get reimbursed for. Reimbursement can take a while. Currently, we have another conversations with the bond bank to look at borrowing a little bit more and kind of figure some of that out. And then we also have funds coming in that is finally our reimbursement coming back from 2023 flooding. So that's sort of filling some of that cash flow for us to kind of do the current recovery work. But the interest on that is 0.5%, and we're obligated to return 50% of each payment from the from federal sources, FEMA and Federal Highway to the bond bank, and then the other half of that can provide some liquidity for us to be pursuing some of this recovery work, hiring consultants, et cetera.
Did that answer it, Carl? Or you?
yeah,
Are you looking at magnitude? Is that what
I was looking for magnitude too.
Yeah.
2023 was like I think
300,000?
310.
20?
I think it was 380 ultimately. With a lot of the sweater and everything, so quite a lot, quite a lot less.
What is it now?
We don't know. I mean, what's the estimate for what we're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
spend?
What does Gary come up? And I'd like to clarify, is this town costs or
No.
that's the town share, 300,023?
The 300,000 was the estimated cost for damages and what FEMA was 160 that came back from FEMA,
116, no, well, it went up to
another 50.
196.
196,000 we got back for that. And we are already, expecting over 800,000 back in repair, emergency repair. Reimbursement from federal highway. And another 200-some thousand from FEMA initially, emergency, that whole process is much longer to figure out what we get back from FEMA. But it's already $1 million coming back. And then when you think about the cost of federal projects. That's all being costed out on the FEMA side right now, that'll be a while. And the federal highway costing happens project by project, so we don't really know yet. So. That's one of those items of what we know, what we don't know, we know the numbers will be coming, but we don't have them yet. Yeah. Arian, do you have a question?
I just. Is there? Well, on the damage summary, we have to like put a number in there, but maybe that's. Yeah, the area is doing, on the damage summary that's been submitted to FEMA, there was a column of like estimated costs, but I think it's pretty rough estimate, like back of the napkin kind of thing. But do you know the sum total even that number, just so. Like order of magnitude,
Was FEMA 10 million? Is that
Yeah.
right? It was 10 million on the FEMA.
it's in the, okay, it's in the $10 million range of what.
On FEMA,
On FEMA alone,
Oh,
not, which doesn't count the Brook Road
Right.
stuff,
Okay.
exactly.
wow, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. Okay, anything else, the room? Okay, I think we're there. Your Michael,
Yeah, I do have a quick announcement.
please.
There's another piece we chose not to talk about tonight, which is the damage done to the Batchelor Damage Center of the town in 2023. And what might be done is to either save that dam or not. We have a special meeting just to specifically address that a week from Thursday. So if you're interested in that part of the story, we're dealing with it separately then.
Thank you. And I will say, this is not the last time we'll be talking about these issues. This is, as you saw, that we're still really early in the process of this recovery. Years, we will be making these decisions together. And so we'll keep you informed as things develop. We'll be scheduling public meetings for input. We have a website, a webpage on the town website, and we publish all of our meeting notes and any of our reports. So if you want to dive in, information is there. Peter?
Oh, sorry. I didn't see it.
I had a question about, the, individual assistance rather than public assistance. I know you did the 2023 buyouts, Marion, 2024.
No, Aaron did not, it was actually a team, they speak now.
My understanding is
IA.
we have 10 approvals,
You're talking about buyouts? Buyouts.
Talking about buyouts, talking about buyouts.
There you go.
Because with the buyouts, what will come to the town ultimately is what to do with the green space once that is created.
Right.
Once those decisions are made. Last time we had 10, we had the 3 approved from 2023, and we had, I think it was 10 from 2024.
Yeah.
Right, and to my knowledge, there hasn't been an appraisal for any of those done yet, which is a step required before the individual homeowners, building owners make their decision. So I'm just wondering if either of you could, both of you could speak to when the select board, the town may be looking at making decisions about that green space. For example, if a number of the village buildings are moved and that brook is allowed to go where it wants to go rather than where we forced it to go, prior bridge. We may be looking at more park space and which maybe we need a bigger recreation and arts committee, to be doing that, or public works. And I'm just wondering, where in the budget cycle should we be thinking as a select board, should we be thinking about that when we build the budget in fall?
I have an answer to that.
That's an important question, because we need to know what to do with this land once it becomes owned by the town. National Park Service was here last Wednesday, we had a tour with them. They're offering free consulting to what we can do, what we're allowed to do, what we can build. Very limited, but what we can build in the area. And they recommended plantings that will help stabilize the river, so.
So that's a funding source potentially and some resources.
The funding they can direct us to funding sources for sculptures, for gazebos, for pathways. But this is gonna take a lot of public input.
Is there a question on the timing of the layouts? Is that what you wanted to know? Yeah, Michael?
I think that, speaking both, because Aaron and I are in pretty good communication about this, and I've spoken with Matt Hand recently, that we have 4 appraisal teams in the state to deal with all of the houses that are damaged in Mendonville, and in some cases going back to 2023, like Montpelier Berry, and it's a very long and exhausting process, and it's kind of backed up. But what we are hoping for is first appraisals to start happening here within the next month and a half or sooner. That the first 3 houses to be done are on School Street, which is on the north bank of the Winter Street. And then the later houses that will kick in are a group of 10 that have already been approved, most of which are in the lower village, but 1 or 2 which are higher up on the brook. And then 15 additional houses, which some of the most damaged ones would then be also coming in fairly soon. We hope within 3 or 4 weeks we'll have actually word about that. And then when the appraisal.
The important is that nobody's been rejected.
Yeah, that's right. No one has been rejected. We're not expecting them to be rejected. But the timeline that we were requested was to say that then after the appraisal, then a closing has to occur to selling the property to the town. And when that process is over, then the demolition is going to follow in supposedly a 90-day period of time. We have one buyout that I'm looking at as an example in Marshfield, where the couple has already sold and moved away 90 days ago, and the house is still standing because you also need practical considerations of availability of contractors. And then when the house is out of the way, do you actually say, should a meadow be here, a park be here, a walk be here, or is it?
So that's another long process. It's that, they're all like that, nothing is immediate, and we have to just take it step by step. All right,
There's one more question online here. I wonder if George Kingston wants to speak to it. Or I don't know who wants to speak to it.
What's the question?
Which question?
It's from the top of the screen to the bottom. It's connected.
So should any decisions or discussions about the repair, the future of the Brook Road, just wait until we get to this imaginary state of stability? George?
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, I'll try and address that. The brook, if we didn't live here anymore and we left it alone for 100 years, it would all eventually work itself out. But that's not the situation we're in. We have a road system, we have houses, we're living near the brook. And we can't simply. We can't wait for it to fix itself, but there are a lot of good actions that we can take. After the scoping study is finished that Karen mentioned, we'll have a lot more real detailed information about what the brook is trying to do. Where are the places where we can get out of the way of the brook? Where can we guide it in some fashion?
Some of the slopes can be stabilized, some not at all easily. And some parts of the stream bed can be helped to move to more stable states, but it takes work. There's gonna be river engineering work to do on the brook to help it towards stability. This is gonna be an ongoing process for sure.
Thank you, sir. There's one new message. Is there something in there?
To have removed debris. Is the suggestion of what would have helped the brook before the floods. I've listened to the dead tree gentleman before and believe he is wrong with his assumptions. As it currently stands, the Brook Road is now a lost cause. The town should be now focused on access to current property owners and proactive mitigation to protect the village.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Thank you. So thank you for that comment and this is an ongoing conversation, so we will just continue to talk with each other and we expect that people will have a variety of opinions as this community processes it. All right, so Carl, I think we're done. I'll turn back to you so you can adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for posting this. This is the kind of discussion we need to have with the community and get input and make sure people understand what's going on. So thank you.
Hey, thanks to Karen.
Oh, you're welcome.
This is an official meeting, so we do have a quorum. So can I have a motion to adjourn? Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are now officially adjourned at 7:20. Thank you, everybody.
Right.